performance improvements, vampire overhaul, werewolf changes and new mythic items. All of this is coming to Greymoor, so stay tuned as we break it down. Hey, it's Dan, and welcome back to Unified Gaming. Now in this video I want to break down the patch notes for the Greymoor 6.00. Obviously these things change regularly, but we're not going to dwell on that. All you need to know is that the patch on the whole looks really good. There is a link in the description to read it for yourself, but there is loads and loads of pages, 50 pages worth. I have since gone through, highlighted all of the key bits that are relevant for PvP especially, but also really big changes for PvE too. I'm going to kind of go through in kind of a longer-ish video, just breaking down what do you need to know, ready for next patch, and I will then obviously test it on the PTS in the next couple of days. So if there is a video that you really want to see, then obviously comment below, let me know, and I'll get onto it as quick as I can. And if you haven't guessed it, this channel is all about helping you get better with next level builds, guides and gameplay. So why not start improving today by subscribing and turn on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now let's get started. So I'm now going to go through and just break down all the key things that I've highlighted just to make it easier for you to understand exactly what you need to know for the next patch. And obviously you can read it yourself, there's a link in the description, but there are also timestamps too. All in all, it looks really good, especially from a performance perspective. So what can you expect? Well, there's new mythic items which look pretty cool. They're not great, but one of them is pretty decent actually for PvP. New mount, siege weapons, they haven't really said what that is though. They've got some new item sets and some sort of perfected changes. It is a free update mostly, so all the vampire changes, the werewolf changes is free, you don't have to pay for it, which is really cool. They've done lots of server optimizations to both the server and the client, and for me this is like the biggest thing, having worked in servers before, hosted servers in Minecraft and all that sort of stuff, kind of just dabbling with code and programming, and this is a massive change, so fingers crossed it actually pays off for them. They've also done a few things at Imperial City, they've done some stuff for housing if that's your cup of tea, and the patch actually is quite small, it's only like 6 and a bit gigabytes, so considering last patch was like 50 odd because you had to re-download the game, this is obviously much better. So I'm going to go through it now, feel free to skip to what you want. Okay, so what's in Greymoor? Well, it's a normal zone basically. You've got delves, you've got world bosses, dungeons, crafter sets, trial. None of that stuff really bothers me too much. The antiquity system sounds somewhat okay, but it does seem a bit of a grind in all honesty, so read that at your own leisure, but personally that's not for me. Just the items are somewhat okay, they're just a bit lackluster, okay? You do, however, get a really cool mount, so definitely check that out. The mount is absolutely awesome. It's like a wolf that's made with dwarven metal and stuff. It's like a dwarven wolf. It looks really cool. So I definitely want to get that. That's like the one thing I do actually really want to get. Information about the trial. Obviously that's not what I focus on, but feel free to read that yourself. I did look at the trial sets though, and kind of the overland sets. The first set is an overland set, Winter's Respite, and it sounds alright on the whole actually, but I can't see it being used kind of beyond people just picking up and maybe selling or buying it like a starter set. In all honesty, it's not particularly great because it's like a hill on the floor, a bit like sort of Healing Springs, and people move outside it. If it follows you then it could be decent, but based on how it's written it doesn't, so it's a bit in all honesty. The medium armor set is also somewhat a bit so I wouldn't stress about that. Then you've got obviously the sort of heavy armor set, which does sound actually quite useful for PvP. I could see this being helpful in things like sort of battlegrounds and that kind of tanky meta if you want, especially that armor has been nerfed heavily. The crafted sets are really interesting. Some of them are really good and like ridiculously overpowered in all honesty. So this first one, Stun's Favour, it's really strong. It's like New Moon but just penetration version of it. Works with magicka and stamina, but sadly as with New Moon it's going to favour stamina once more. The big thing is that it has off balance as the condition to get all this penetration. So you get like 13,000 armor penetration, which is phenomenal, but only against people who are off balance. So what that means is that when you obviously attack somebody with Dizzy and Swing, you set them off balance, thus you get this 13,000 penetration, which is like a 20% damage increase at least. It's like a 24% roughly, which is huge. So this is going to be a stamina set. It's going to be paired with New Moon, absolutely busted, crazy stuff there. So this is going to be meta next patch. Dragon's Appetite is pretty in all honesty. I wouldn't use it. It's okay, feel free to read it yourself, but it's not great. Spell Parasite does seem somewhat interesting, although the magicka pool is like low, it's 63 magicka, it's every 0.25 seconds, so if you times it by 4, it's like 240 magicka back a second, and basically that's 480 regen. So that bit there is 480 magicka regen, which actually is pretty decent. The trial set seems pretty strong in all honesty. This could potentially become meta next patch. I could see tanks even possibly using this because they do have the heavy attack now and again, and you basically get Major Slayer for your whole team. So I could see tanks or healers, probably healers, using this just to get Slayer for the whole team because of how the buff works. The stamina set is pretty good in all honesty, but I can't see it being, you know, meta strong, but it's not going to be meta in all honesty. The healing set is pretty good actually, but it's not going to replace Olorum's, it's just not up there in all honesty. The tanking set is very good because obviously it gives you major ages to everybody, which in all honesty that's really hard to give to like damage dealers, especially stamina, so this is a really good set. So for the trial stuff and PvE stuff, so the Roaring Opportunist is really good, especially on healers. I don't think it's going to be used as a DPS set because people will just use it as healer. The healer set is pretty terrible. I can't see people using that sadly, in all honesty. You might have somebody run this on healer 1, you might have somebody run this on healer 2, but you won't have this double bard, it's like a one healer only. And then I see tanks running this. So it basically gives you kind of like a new shift to the meta. It will work these 3 sets, but the current sets work just as well, so I wouldn't stress. As for the mythic items, the way in which people build currently is just a bit, like, you have issues with it because there's just not enough slots, and that's the issue. You sacrifice a 5-piece generally to gain a 1-piece, which although looks strong, they're pretty lackluster. They kind of have like a kiss curse effect, which, you know, you're sacrificing a 5-piece anyway for a kiss curse effect. It's not worth it in all honesty. So this first one is not great. Basically when you bash people you can just get magicka back, which, you know, it's not particularly great. Yes, it's a lot of magicka every second, but I can't see it being used particularly extensively. It might work on perhaps, say, a sort of Froststaff tank build where you possibly use it with Elemental Drain because that goes through block and Desert Rose, but it's a very niche build in all honesty, so I can't see people using this. Same for the light armor, it's not particularly strong. It's light armor which is the issue. When you kill people you get obviously the damage. It could be used in PvE for extra damage on magicka users because you're generally at range, so I do see this used somewhat. But again, the issue is what 5-piece set do you drop? So again, you're going to have to really try and find that into your build and try and find space for it. As for PvP, it's not going to be used because it's hard to get to the maximum stacks. The medium set is not great in all honesty. I can't see people using that. The ring is pretty terrible, this one. If you're a crafter though, this is like phenomenal. Like if you are doing crafting stuff, this is really good. If you're kind of trying to do Sigil Order, this is really good. So actually this does have a lot of uses, but it's not, you know, great anywhere else. Malekith's band is absolutely busted, like so broken. I will put a video explaining fully why it is, but this will need a massive nerf. Like there is no reason to run critical damage if you've got this set in the game. So strong. The next set is, again, hit and miss in all honesty, because yes, you get some really nice regen from it, but you're going to have to give up, you know, a 5-piece once again. So again, this isn't going to be used. You could probably use it with niche things like willpower, but again, it's niche. They've added some new collectibles, you know, feel free to read that yourself. Nothing sort of fancy in all honesty. A few new homes, which sounds somewhat okay, but again, there's nothing great in all honesty. There's some new alchemy ingredients, which does sound pretty cool. So you get basically a new buff, which is awesome. And it's a debuff that basically consumes the target's ultimate, which, you know, is awesome. So you can train that ultimate points, which, you know, that could be quite massive in a 1vx. Like if you're fighting outnumbered and somebody hits you with this, you're going to be absolutely screwed, because if you're losing your ultimate generation because of that poison, you're going to really notice it. And obviously, if you consume a potion with it, it will take away yours for some reason. They've added some new runes which look pretty cool. So they're basically like tri-stat runes but for recovery and reduced cost. So that's pretty cool. The big change is vampire stuff, so just feel free to read it yourself. But I'm going to go down to the skills which people want to see. All in all, vampire is kind of a high risk, high reward playstyle. So the idea is that when you're a vampire, to get better and have better abilities, you need to be a higher stage to access them, especially the passives, which are really good. but that does come with like penalties and cons and So the idea is that when you kind of feed, you go up a stage rather than down, so you basically have to feed to gain power, so you have to constantly refresh this every 4 hours. So there's going to be a bit of a kind of maintenance basically. It's not too bad in all honesty, but it's just something to maintain. Obviously, as you get each vampire stage, your vampire abilities get cheaper, which is good. The passives also can then activate, which obviously if you don't have the right stage, they won't activate. Some of them are really, really strong. And then obviously the vampire stages do reduce your health recovery, they increase your damage taken from flame, and they also increase your non-cost vampire skills, which that is the real big one there. So if you're a stage 4 vampire for some of the really good passives, all of your other skills are going to be expensive. Ultimates, weapon skills, class skills. So just do factor that in. So it's going to be that kind of, you get lots of benefits, but there are quite significant drawbacks. Do the benefits outweigh the drawbacks? I need to do a follow-up video to kind of go through it fully. One thing that's really interesting, that merchants won't trade with you if you're a vampire, stage 4. So just bear that in mind, that if you need to buy stuff, you may want to let a stage drop. They basically just changed Drain Essence and just got rid of it from the game and just renamed it basically, so that would be different. Mistform has been changed, so now it's a toggle ability, so you kind of like turn it on and off like sort of symbiosis or mend wounds, so it's somewhat useful. Whilst it's on, you can't do any other skill, it just like turns it off. You can't heal yourself in it, you can't be healed by other people. One morph obviously gives you the movement speed, the other morph damages people, which heals you. But in all honesty, I think people are going to go for the speed because it's kind of used as like a chitin or get out of jail skill. So, yep. Bat Swarm got moved. That's now on an ultimate. The ultimates are ridiculously good. So the spammable is Eviscerate. Basically, it's a melee skill. The more sort of health you've lost, the more damage it does. One morph gives you kind of a crit, but you're below half health. The other one basically, as I've just said, I can't see people using this, sadly, it's not particularly great. Blood Frenzy is a toggle. This is really good. Really, really, really good. Especially on snipers, and they've actually changed something to make it more balanced. So whilst it's on, you gain like massive weapon and spell damage, but you lose health every single second and you can't heal. It doesn't say by yourself, it says by other players. So if you can self-heal, this could be somewhat overcome. But yeah, just if you can't heal at all, then this is balanced in all honesty, because you gain a lot of weapon damage to lose a lot of healing, so there is a trade-off. One morph basically gives you like even more based on the health cost, so it just costs more and more health the longer it runs, but you get more and more damage. The other one gives you like health back once you've kind of casted it, so you might have it on for a little bit. When you turn it off, you get a big bunch of health back, so that can be somewhat okay. But this is really good on gank builds especially. Vampire Drain's been changed somewhat, so one basically gives you stamina over the channel, which is somewhat of a change. The other gives you ultimate, that's about it, same as before. The damage is pretty high in all honesty. You then got a stun, which is somewhat okay. The stun affects everybody around you. It's basically like, Fighter's Guild rune, so it's a bit repurposed in all honesty. I can't see people using this, because the problem is that the passives and the drawbacks are really high for magical users, so I can't see them using this. As for the vampire morph, you get instant health when you turn into it, which that is going to be an issue. It's like Bone Goliath, so I can see people use this in battlegrounds for like capture the relic. So you can basically grab the relic, put this on, massive burst heal from this, pretty much unkillable because of how high your health pool is. You also get increased health, stamina, and magicka. You also heal for damage that you do. So this is going to be really, really strong in battlegrounds, especially in like objective game modes. One morph gives you Bat Swarm around you. The other morph puts you into stage 5, but you have no drawbacks, which is actually really, really significant, so that is quite interesting. Passive wise, nothing drastic in all honesty. They removed the feed and just changed how it works. The recovery has been like gutted. Turn people into a vampire has been moved to number 4. Undeath has been changed somewhat, so now it's obviously damage reduction based on your missing health. So instead of it being like below 50% health, it's from 100%. So the idea is that if you say missing 30% health, you get obviously a bit of mitigation rather than nothing before, so this is actually quite good. This really helps offset that fire damage, so that could be quite a strong passive on some builds. Unnatural resistance has gone, Dark Stalk has been changed, which is really good. It now lets you enter sneak much faster, which is awesome, and it also allows you to move whilst kind of in sneak at full speed, which is just perfect for snipers. They've added a new feed, which is that's just there. This one is pretty strong in all honesty. So when you kind of leave stealth, sneak, invisibility, misform, you get weapon and spell damage. So this is quite a good passive, especially for like magicka and stamina. This last one is busted. So it reduces sprint cost, which is good. I'm happy with that. But you become invisible after continuously sprinting. Now, from what I've seen, it's been like 3 seconds. You can have like stealth zergs running around. You know, pop out of stealth and just one-shot people because there's like 15 of you in stealth running from keep to keep. It's silly. Now those performance improvements are really, really big. They've changed how pets work. So in PvE, you should get some like improvements in frame rate, some stability in towns especially. So that's good there. Now the big change is this one here, like the way in which the characters are processed. Now before it was single threaded basically. What that means is that if you have like a donkey having to walk 100 meters, pulling a trailer by himself, it's going to take him some time, isn't it? But if you basically had 50 donkeys pulling the same trailer, the same distance, it's going to be significantly faster. And that's what this is here. So basically this means that people will load into the world much smoother, much quicker, which means you should see less stutters when you go into keeps and into big battles, which could be really good, could really help those crashes, which is obviously going to really, really help. They've also then changed the way in which the client is also working as well, and it's now multi-threaded. So again, instead of things being kind of done by one donkey, it's now done by 20 donkeys, for example. So just much, much faster, which is always good. And the idea is that if you can utilize more cores to obviously generate and sort of render the world, you can have less sort of FPS issues in Cyrodiil, in busy kind of environments. So this top one basically says when there's loads of people, there should be less lag, which is good. This one says when there's lots of like graphical stuff, lots of stuff to render, less lag. So these combined on console especially could be a massive game changer. They then also change how characters get drawn on the client. So again, not just on the server, but when you look at a person who renders in, it renders in much smarter, much faster. So that way it doesn't, you know, go like a black shadow, which you get if you go into like Cyrodiil. So that should be, again, quicker rendering time. So people should load in quicker, less lag, always good. They've also improved lots of like particles and projectile effects. So basically when it's all happening at once, it's going to be less laggy, which, you know, that's always a good thing for a GPU. And then on top of that, they've also made some optimizations to make sure that just the memory is kind of a bit more efficient, so the RAM isn't being used as quick. That's more of a console improvement, so that should be really, really helpful. So to summarize these performance improvements, you're basically going to have pets load a lot quicker without any kind of issues, without people being kicked. This one here is massive, people will load faster, so they'll render in quicker from the server, things will render in faster, so that's just going to be less lag, which is good. From the client and from like yours perspective, people are going to also look nice properly, quickly, with like less black shadows, figurines and stuff, so again a good change here. They also change obviously how sort of the world generates there, so again another good change. They also improve like particles and stuff, so just less sort of strain on FPS, so that's good for consoles. And again, this is also really good for consoles. So I honestly envisage like a better sort of performance this patch. Will it fix all of the issues? No, in all honesty, but will it be a step in the right direction? Definitely. So I'm quite optimistic for the changes this patch performance-wise. As for the Imperial City, they've just basically added some daily quests, that's about it. Nothing drastic in all honesty, feel free to read it yourself, but nothing massive there. Houses and stuff, just, you know, have a look there. You could just control where you put stuff a bit more precise, that's about it. Some new sort of vampire housing decorations, new achievements, motifs, stuff. As for templates, just ignore all that. They've obviously changed the critical resistance and the way in which that works, so you get like a flat critical resist buff, which currently isn't working properly, but based on how they've kind of adjusted in pen, I reckon the critical resist buff is going to be about 500 to 600 just like mathematically to kind of keep the same values as before. So I sort of expect most people will have 500 critical resist at all times, maybe 600, but not much more than that. If it's higher than that, then you'd obviously have more in pen than you did before, which is going to be an issue, as you can see. They've obviously got a few bugs. As for kind of class balance this patch, there isn't much, it's just more bug fixes in all honesty. So Stamina Templar, Stamina Necromancer, Stamina generally, stronger. Another patch of it, so you know, it's 2 years in a row now, so yeah, you know, play Stamina, woo. As for Stam Necro, that's just as busted, just bug fixes basically. As for combat changes, so they've done lots of things to improve that performance. So The idea is that synergies are now more intuitive, so they prioritize better. So the idea is that if you need to use something that's going to be more impactful, like a purifier, when you actually need it, it will put that first, rather than, the conduit, which is pain in the ass. So this just makes much more sense. They've also fixed some issues with like medium attacks not being sort of done properly. The change to the logic and the way in which passives are handled is kind of done to reduce server load, so that means that it's going to be less laggy overall, so that's a good change. They've also changed how sort of proc conditions work as well, so instead of it saying, look, is it true or false, I'm not sure, yes or no, and just keep asking it, it basically asks it once, determines the output, and then just waits. So basically it's just going to stop calculations, which again means more improvement. So again, more sort of fixes to kind of improve, which is always good. They've also just changed pets, so pets can't pull you out of stealth, which was a bug, so that's somewhat fixed, so that's good for Nightblades. Pets also kind of inherit sort of the parents, so whoever casted them, proper stats related to like armor and penetration, so that's always good. They've reduced bash damage to 80%, so that whole bash weaving that you saw from the light and heavy attack sort of changes. They've obviously nerfed bashing, so now it's not worth doing. You might just stick to a light attack. But if you do want to bash, and obviously use bash glyphs, so you can then make them viable and somewhat useful, so that is an option there. They've changed obviously how healing reductions work in Battle Spirit, so that's a good change in my opinion. As for buffs and durations, if you had a set that gave you like a major or minor buff and you casted a skill, it could like reset it or update the buff incorrectly. All they've done is just fix it. So again, this is like a slight server improvement, so it's going to be more efficient, thus less lag, which is always good. As for kind of class changes, it's nothing major, it's just more balance. This is a good change, so there's no like empower. So on empower and change, you've got like 2 stacks, now it's 1 stack, so that's somewhat okay. Nightblade had no real changes. Sorcerer had nothing really, in all honesty. Overload did get some fixes though, which is always good, so that's now viable. It's going to work better, which is good. It's what you want. It's not going to be as buggy. Templar and all that stuff just kind of stayed as it was. Warden had 1 change, which kind of was a fix, so that way Deep Fissure kind of was actually registering properly, because it wasn't always, so that's good, so you get more consistent damage. Restoration Staff basically had its animation sped up on the heavy attacks, so that's about it. It's more similar to like Lightning Staffs, so it will be kind of similar sort of duration, but it's like tick tick big bang rather than it being tick 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 tick, so it just makes more sense. They've obviously done some stuff with Misform to fix it. Werewolf has had a big change, so now the pack leader obviously summons direwolves, which gets like bonuses, which are cool. This one is awesome, so Hersine's bounty is now like Dark Deal for werewolf, so you can basically convert Magicka into stamina, which is just phenomenal. You also get major brutality, so you get your weapon damage buff, which is like really good. This one basically gives you major berserk if you cast it at full health, so PvE DPS werewolves could be viable now. And then the other morph of it obviously gives you more stamina and health recovery when you use it, so that could be helpful for PvP. As for the How, it does more damage when people are facing you, so it's got a slight nerf. This morph again had a nerf too, so the How is not as good as it used to be. Pounce has been reworked, so it does what it did before, but if you do it again, you basically put a bleed on them, which is like your execute, so you basically got an execute now on a werewolf, so that's always good. Brutal Pounce is awesome. It basically gives you kind of carnage, and it gives you access to increase your weapon damage, and obviously you can do it 6 times, so you get loads and loads of weapon damage buff, which is awesome. And the second one just helps you stay in werewolf a bit longer and sort of grants you stamina, so again, sustain buff, so you get more damage, or sustain and stay in werewolf longer, so good changes there. Roar has also been updated, so now you set people off balance, which is good. You also get major savagery when you have it slotted, so crit chance basically. One morph obviously applies main, which is good, so you can reduce people's damage to make you tankier. One morph increases your heavy attack speed, which is really good. As for the transformation, if you use the dire wolves, you now basically just get more damage mitigation, which is pretty cool, and you also get minor courage too. So basically you get bulkiness, which is good, and you get damage done. So in all honesty, if you're in PvP, the pack leader morph is very good right now. Fighters Guild just fixes and more fixes. Barrier had a cost increase, which is good, so now it's a bit more expensive. And it also goes to 12 targets, so it's got a bit of a cap, so that makes somewhat more sense. Just more fixes. They've buffed Alliance War potions, so they're now equivalent to like Crown Store potions, which is good, so that way you can actually use them more sort of efficiently. So you could probably sell them for quite a bit of gold for like PvE. They could be somewhat useful now as like a poor man alternative to proper potions. They've also changed loads of sets this patch. So this set's just been changed to basically work for the entire group, which is like really good. So that's a good change. Amber Plasm looks absolutely phenomenal now. So basically they buffed it, and it also now gives you health recovery too. So I can see Amber Plasm being really useful in PvP especially. These sets aren't particularly great. Draga's Rest just had a big sort of heal increase, but again it's still not great. Elfbane doesn't work with Zarn anymore, so it doesn't increase those kind of things, so that's kind of something to factor in there. Impreg's also had a nerf as well, so it's lost 350 critical resist, so it's not as good. Still a decent set. Kvatch Gladiator is really good for kind of werewolves. It basically gives you execute when you're kind of getting them below 25% health, which is massive, so that's good on werewolf nowadays. Ognum Scales is incredibly strong. This is really good, so I can see this being used in PvP. Reactive got nerfed, so although you get the same damage thing, it's got a 5-second duration, but it's got a massive cooldown. So the cooldown's gone up like huge, which basically means this is not as good as it used to be. You could basically get like one stun, and then you don't get that defense anymore. Whereas before, if you got stunned and ensnared, you'd have it for both of those. So this is a big nerf. Transmutation also got a massive nerf, so healers now actually have to heal you consistently in order to keep this on you. So you can't backbar this like you could on a Templar, get the high sort of defense from this, and then go offensive. You can't do that anymore. So you need a proper healer to run this in order for it to be viable and to have just a decent uptime. All of these other sets are pretty bad. Winterborn had a fix, which is somewhat good. The big change, those monster sets have been standardised, so they're now all equally viable and all equally powerful. So we're going to go through those quite quick. Balorg basically just gives you spell and weapon damage based on how much you cast, but you get penetration, which is really good, so this is still a really good burst set. Bloodspawn, as I predicted, did get a nerf. Their armor went down by pretty much 50%, the ultimate went down by about 40%, and the duration is also down as well. So basically, Bloodspawn is still really good, just not as like OP as it was. So Chokeform had a big buff, it had like a sort of 25% heal increase, but the problem is though that it isn't as long as a range, so you need to kind of be closer to it, so there's more counterplay. If somebody gets this, you either fight where they are, you just move away and force them away from it, so this is it's more balanced. Dormerhouse had a nice buff finally, so now you get weapon and spell damage when you're in the ring, and if you're not in the ring then obviously they do damage as well, if they're kind of on the outside of it. And there's no like proc, it just happens, which is good. Earthcore had a kind of spin adjusted, but it's still not great in PvP. It's like a one trick pony, does its job and then that's it. Engine Guardian had a massive nerf in all honesty. So you basically lost like half the sustain, which is pretty huge. Yes, the healing has gone up, but this was always used for the sustain, never the healing. And they've also reduced the range as well, so you need to be closer to it for it to work. So Engine Guardian, although it's very good, isn't as good as it used to be. Elambra's had a kind of slight buff in all honesty. The damage has gone up, but it can't double proc. But if you're somebody using one element, such as a sorcerer focusing on lightning damage for like a roleplay build, this is a good change for you. Is it going to be best in slot meta? Not really, but it just makes it more useful. All these other sets aren't really important. Lord Warden also had a nerf, so the armor has been reduced, and the 2-piece armor has been reduced as well. So you'll notice that all the 1-piece armor buffs have been reduced heavily. That's kind of like a consistent theme that people are going to be a bit squishier this patch. They've changed more of the Infernal to be more consistent, so the damage is more kind of consistent. It's not kind of spike up and down and have weird patterns and stuff. It just works more intuitively. There's a bit more counterplay. You can't target it, which is a big sort of change. So that's just so much better because it's an absolute pain in the neck fighting a zoo. So this is really good. Mighty Tudor, like Lord Warden, had the 1-piece reduced. Kina had a damage buff, which has gone up. Night Flames had kind of a heal reduction, but a higher uptime, so it's a slight buff in all honesty for PvP. It just procs easier. Pirate Skeleton's now viable finally, which is good. So that's somewhat better. The 1-piece though has been nerfed. All these other sets are pretty Shadowrend's had a big nerf, so rather than being minor maim, it's now just a flat damage reduction. It can't stack with other sources, which is good. It doesn't obviously do as much damage, it's had a big damage nerf. So all in all, Shadowrend is nowhere near as good as it used to be. All of these other sets are kind of here. Thurviken's had a nerf as well, so it doesn't stay up as long as possible, so that's a good change. Tremor Scale has been kind of adjusted to be a group set, which is awesome. So now there's actually a way to kind of debuff enemies with a monster set, which is good. I like that. Troll King did get nerfed, which it needed it, in all honesty. Valken Scorer did get adjusted, so now the 2-piece is still what it was, but the penetration on the 1-piece is going to make it better. So this is a really good set. Zarn had a kind of buff but a nerf at the same time, so it does less damage per tick, but the damage scaling goes up and it lasts longer. And it's got a higher proc chance, so basically you're going to get slightly more damage than you had before, but it's going to take longer to get that damage, which means it's less bursty. So it means there's just more counterplay to it, which I think is a good change. It's nowhere near as cheesy in PvP. As for the arena weapons, they've added perfected versions for like Dragonstar and Maelstrom, which is awesome. I've just highlighted the key ones for like PvP and the ones people actually use in PvE too. The False Pulse one, it basically just gives spell damage for the perfected version. The rest of it stays as it was pretty much, just a few bug fixes. Defensive Position is really good. This is like really good. This basically lets you become like a sorcerer on any class. You can convert your stamina to magicka with this skill, so it is very strong. The restoration stuff on Black Rose has had a bit of a nerf, so it's now 2 seconds, not 3, so that's kind of a big change. The recovery kind of has also been reduced too, to be more balanced on the perfected version. Blade Cloak got a nerf finally, which is awesome. It's lost major protection, but it's got a flat 10%. So yes, you could stack this 10% with the major protection, but major protection is really hard to come by, so all in all, this is a good change. This is a really good change. The Master Staff's been changed to be really interesting. It's like a 600 damage boost on Destructive Touch. So rather than it being like an extra damage on the skill, it's just a damage boost, which means this could be really good in PvE. I'm unsure how it's going to be in PvP in all honesty, so I will need to test this, but I could see this still being useful in Magical Warden especially, because you're just going to get a lot more damage. You get 600 there for casting the skill, and 100 there, so 700 damage from this one set, which is quite significant. And that damage obviously buffs all of your skills. So this is going to be an interesting change to see how this works. As for the Titanic Cleave, this is basically the stamina's answer to proximity detonation. So if you basically get this, this is proxy det. It's really good. There's no target cap now, it's like 24 people, so you could run into a Zerg with this. And if you put this on a hybrid build, this will be phenomenal on a hybrid build, because you could actually use proxy det as well. And that would just be absolutely crazy. Like that new set that we saw above, and then this. I could just see the cheese right now. They've also nerfed Impen, so now it's kind of lost 80 armor roughly, which is quite noticeable. So on the kind of all of your pieces, you're going to lose 600 critical resist. They did say they're going to add some base critical resist to each character, so I reckon that's probably what they're going to do. That you're going to lose it here, but you're going to gain it at all times. So it means you could choose to run a few well fitted if you really wanted to. They've also added one more change for PC users, which is anti-aliasing. So basically this is just a graphics option that makes your game sort of process light and sort of textures properly, and just kind of gives them another way of processing it. So it could give you some performance improvements, it could not, it depends on your graphics card, but it's worth a try. Turn it on, if it works keep it, if it doesn't turn it off. So that's just a nice option. As for the rest of the stuff, it's pretty much just PvE changes and there's nothing major, it's just bug fixes. So that's kind of the patch all in all. It's kind of an in-depth kind of breakdown of this. So that there, guys, is the patch 6.0.0. So Greymoor, it's obviously in PTS. There's obviously quite a lot of changes, but not massive changes. Is the meta going to change in PvP? Not really. Is it going to be the same tank meta? Not to the same extent, because there's much more penetration sources. So yeah, and it's also hard to stack armor, so I do think that you're going to see people a little bit squishier, and so they might then have to sacrifice a bit of damage for obviously a bit more flat defense, because actually they can't afford to obviously heal themselves because healing's nerfed, and they can't also afford to kind of take the big hits because they don't have the same resistances from Bloodspawn, they don't have the same critical resistance. So what can you take away from this patch? Well, basically healing in PvP is less, resistances on the whole are less in PvP, so people are going to be less tankier, they can't heal as quick, and they can't take as much damage at once because they have less armor. And on top of that, there's more penetration sets, which means there's just more way to bypass those tanky targets. So actually, is the tech meta going to change? I don't know, but it's promising. So we're going to have to kind of jump in, see what it's like, and go from there. But with that said, guys, this video is long enough as it is. And I'll say a big thank you to all of our patrons who are really helping to support the channel in kind of these difficult times. And if you want to support the channel and myself, then obviously consider donating. There's a link in the description. But with that said, guys, I am going to sign off. Let me know what you want to see next in the comments. Take care, and bye.